radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark. Today is December 12th. We have 1 month left in this year of 2016. I cannot believe it, but it is here. It's true, although I can't believe I'm the age that I've arrived at. I long ago thought I'd be dead. You know, when you're young, you think 60 is super old, and guess what? It's not. So anyways, thank you for joining us today. First, I want to give thanks to Jose yesterday for joining us. I hope that he's listening. I went back and listened to our podcast, and the sound and the volume on that was horrendous. And I think it had to do with the fact that I did the interview from my laptop. So I am going to come back and stick at my PC. I think it has a stronger thing, although now that the NSA gets to spy on us, like I read yesterday this article that said that they're opening up the floodgates of spying as of yesterday, and they can hack anything they want. And in fact, when I turned on my PC this morning, it had like a boom, a black flash. So hi, NSA. Glad that you're here. Maybe I'll help convert some of those guys. Because this is what I wanted to talk to you about. I don't have a guest lined up. I think I told you this until next Thursday. It's kind of spotty on how I'm going to be doing this because I've got finals. I finished a final yesterday. I have one next Thursday. And then after that, I'll be able to focus a lot of my attention on making sure this show goes a little bit more smoothly. But in the meantime, my listeners, the however many you are, the growing number of listeners, will have to just bear with me on this thing because there's only one of me. But I want to talk to you today about the propaganda machine. And I have to say that I am quite disturbed by an event. And most of you know that I'm a YouTuber, or was until I got into school, a YouTuber. I go on there infrequently, but Dana Durnford, who's my guest usually on Fridays, has, I think, just had it. And he came out with some pretty salacious, pointed videos this week, publicly demeaning Helen Caldicott, Chris Busby, and Arnie Gunderson. Now, I have said this publicly on this show. I've had an issue with Arnie Gunderson because he spent 30 years inside the industry. And when Fukushima happened, he had a little come to Jesus moment and decided to get on the right side of the fence. And the issue for me with him is that he charges a lot of money. It's really after you made your living helping to destroy the planet, now to help stop it, you want us to pay you. Got paid from the nuclear industry where we paid you, and now we're doing it here. So I kind of, I have to say I have not come to terms with Arnie Gunderson's activism. I have a strong sense of resentment for the fact that I called up his office one time and asked them to come and speak with me and Kevin and to be part of something. And they're like, well, we have to make money, that we have to charge for this. And I'm like, really? So do we. We have to make money and we figure it out somewhere else. So it really did annoy me. I thought it was quite unfair. Uh, I cannot say enough good things about Helen Caldicott. I mean, she and I had a conversation about why she soft pedals at number 4. Her comment was really, this was a private conversation about she has to go by the scientific evidence. To be a scientist, you have to stick with the evidence, and the evidence they're giving us from Fukushima is that there's spent fuel pool, that there is stuff in number 4, number 3. I mean, it's all, it doesn't take common sense. You can look at the pictures and know there's no spent fuel in those buildings, that they're a catastrophic, collapsing mess of a hideousness. So, I understand Dana's resentment, and I hope Dana is listening. I don't think he is, but I don't know if he'll be on because I have to discuss these issues with him tomorrow, which is why I'm bringing it up with you today. Same thing with Chris Busby. I think he gave Chris Busby not a fair shake. These are scientists who have to be credible in the court. They must follow a certain rigor, I suppose. And my comment to Dana will be this afternoon when I talk to him. I don't know if he'll be sharing with us anymore because I am not going to back down on this. I'm not going to turn on Chris Busby and Helen Caldicott. I firmly believe that they have been our only real, true scientific advocates out there getting the truth out. As Jose said yesterday, it's all of our opinions. We don't know. We don't know the facts. So for us to put ourselves in a circle and start shooting our own advocates, our own allies, is a ridiculousness. And I don't know if I'm not going to participate with that. So Dana and I are going to have a conversation. I'm hoping that we can come to terms about the fact that he'll keep those comments. He can discuss his disagreements with him, but I cannot stand the words of calling people traitors and you've betrayed us and blah, blah, blah. No. That's not going to happen on my radio show. Just like last week, I pretty vociferously did not allow one of Chuck to say that, the Democrats started the KKK, which is true, but we're 70 years, 90 years in advance. So, and you know what? People are still getting hung by the KKK. We're about to have the KKK Jeff Sessions. I hope to God the Democrats will stop Jeff Sessions. That's my feeling, because Jeff Sessions is a harm to this country. In fact, every single person on the Trump Nation administration, what I call the KKK administration, is harmful to our country. So far, he has not picked out one person who is decent. And that speaks to, I'm just going to say it, President Pussy Grabber. That's his whole mentality. He doesn't care. He is a seriously hardcore inside the swamp. He's one of the alligators, folks. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about something that's more important than his egotistic, narcissistic rants and the destruction of our economy and our country and the increased levels of violence. Those I'll save for another day. I want to get back to this. I saw a story this morning that just I fell off my chair when I read it. Nuclear power is the most sustainable energy source, IAEA official. I mean, honestly, these IAEA officials, I am so angry at them. It's very difficult for me to not cuss about them. Inside this story, they're talking about how it's really actually not bad, how it's not so bad. It says 30 years after the Chernobyl tragedy and 5 years following Fukushima accident, tragedy and accident, how do you like they frame these? These are freaking catastrophes that are destroying the freaking planet and our atmosphere and all the animals, all life, everything near it. Nobody can still go near Chernobyl, asserting that the world should not forget the horrific disasters. As for the future, NPPs, those are nuclear power plants, and nuclear sites are the most sustainable energy sources in terms of environmental impact. Of course, if there are no nuclear disasters. Look, folks, we have nuclear disasters all over the place. I mean, seriously, it is beyond comprehension that those words would even fall out of that man's mouth. What did we hear the other day from the Department of Washington, where it said that 1 million gallons out of 67 tanks from Hanford have already been spilled. That's a nuclear disaster already. Every single nuclear power facility is ailing, falling apart, and decrepit. It's not like, oh, we can just build a new one, and that's what they're doing. Every single nuclear power plant is a new design. They have never once found one that works. And this whole story about, well, Europe knows how to do nuclear. They're doing it safely. No, they're not. France has a catastrophe on its hand with its nuclear power plants. There is just no way it's even halfway good. So this whole lie is just something that I am on the radio now 5 days a week, and I'm grateful that I get this venue. And frankly, I'm kind of grateful that I'm getting my chops in on how to do this interviewing, how to make this really work as this station grows. And I'm going to encourage everybody listening to this radio show, please share this station, this podcast with your friends, with your family. Encourage people to listen to it. Go to us on ucy.tv. Go to us on YouTube and listen to these interviews. We make big efforts to interview decent people on this radio show and have real conversations about issues that do matter, not just to your little world, but to the entire planet. So I mean, this is shameless self-promotion, but we need it. This radio station is the only place where you can actually hear Nuclear Hot Seat and our information and our interviews with people who are actually doing the work and getting out there. Now, I have been attempting to contact people who have been doing this for a long time, like Kay Drive, for example, from Beyond Nuclear. And Beyond Nuclear to me is super soft pedal, and maybe that's why they won't come interview with me. Kevin Camps does not even return my phone calls. People from Hanford Challenge don't return my phone calls. And this is my point to Dana. Everybody is doing their own little deal. We have all these little nuclear groups all around the country. The reason the nuclear industry is just mowing down the planet is people are refusing to organize. So I am going to be like white on rice. And I am going to be connecting and making an effort to connect. Patty Amino said this best. We need to have like a union. We need to have like a place where all the anti-nukers can go, voice their concerns, and become a force to be reconciled with inside the government. Although we don't really have we have a government, but it's an industrial militarized complex government. With the election of Trump, and frankly, with people saying that the recount is ridiculous, the news this morning that Trump lost by an incredible margin the unpopular vote. Now that they've looked at it all, by the unpopular vote, Trump has the largest gap in difference, and so they're saying it's the Electoral College that elected him. I firmly believe, just like in the Bernie campaign, that there was election fraud. And what is going on with Trump? If they allow Trump to take office, then we know that our country is run entirely by the bankers, which maybe it is. But for Americans to say, give the guy, an average American who is about to lose their Social Security, about to have their Medicare plans turned off, to have people who have had Obamacare, which I don't participate in, but many people believe in the AMA. All of that's going to go away, folks. Life in America is about to get slammed down hard. They are going to collapse our economy after they rape it by next October, I think. You know, they're going to pass the laws, get in, boom, 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 take these things, and they're going to dig in for the gold and take our gold. And when this guy says, taking, of course, there is for no nuclear disasters, you know, even when there is a nuclear disaster, we still have to pay them because these people don't have insurance, because no insurance company will insure a nuclear power plant for the very reason that in France, all of their nuclear facilities are falling apart and they cannot fix them. We have destroyed the entire northern hemisphere with nuclear facilities, period. And that is a fact. And if the millions and billions of people on this planet don't wake up and rise up, I mean, honestly, this has got to end. There's no way. We need to get our scientists back. Thank God Arnie Gunderson came to the right side after Fukushima? Why weren't there hundreds of thousands of scientists like Arnie Gunderson out there speaking out? It's not just the money. It's because the people that run this place are murderers. They are murdering our children, and they threaten every single one of these people. I mean, we heard Patty Amino on this radio station right here tell us that her brake lines were cut, and if she did not know how to drive, she would have gotten into a horrible accident. Now, who do you think did that right when she was working on her settlement? We have got to stop pretending like these people are, that we're not living in a fascist state. It's so outrageous. I mean, we're still saying that we're living in a democracy. Really, we live in a democracy when the vote count is threatened, when we do not know if we have free and fair elections. I mean, it's beyond comprehension, and I do hope that people will share this radio station. We need to get our listenership up. We know that worldwide we have probably several thousand, 100,000, who knows how many, it's hard to count. But the fact is, part of the reason why these anti-nukers don't want to come on this show is because we're meaningless in the pings on the internet. And yet, the way it works, the way networking works, is if you touch 3 people, you have touched thousands of people. Thousands. Go ask anybody with HIV. That's how that works, folks. You sleep with the wrong person. If you sleep with somebody that you have not in a relationship with, you've probably slept with 1,000 people. Who knows the contact that you've had? And that is what we're talking about. We need people to recommend this station on YouTube, UCY TV. We need people to come and listen to our podcast and listen to us live. It is super important that we get this information out. So, of course, there are no nuclear disasters, and that brings me into this. Nuclear radiation and accidents and incidents. Now, this is Wikipedia, which is the very least referable reference that you can have. In school, they don't even allow you to use Wikipedia as a reference. And in fact, that's kind of my contention with Dana. If Dana wants, he says he's done the work. Yeah, he's done the physical work. But, I mean, honestly, Canada has free education. He ought to become a nuclear scientist. I think he has the brain for it. He can go to school and in 5 years be a nuclear scientist. The impact of nuclear accidents has been the topic of a debate practically since first reactors were constructed in 1954. So the very first nuclear reactor was something like 1955 or 56. I mean, the very first one had a big problem. And it takes us through this whole thing. Look, we know that nuclear is a disaster. We've seen it in our children. We've seen what's happening. Our children have cancer now. I mean, it is an outrage that people are not talking about it. Considering there are no accidents, I am going to Donna Gilmore's website, Santa Onofre Safety, and I hope that all of you actually really do, because she has an awesome page where you can go to drop down menus under issues, and you can look at health risks. Let's go to the emergency plan. How about that? I'll open up this page. This is interesting to think about the emergency plan. Most nuclear power plants there is no safe emergency plan with the Santa Onofre Safety Plan. 8.4 million people live within a 50-mile radius of the Santa Onofre nuclear plant. They will need to evacuate if there's an emergency at the plant, like i.e. an earthquake. What if there is an earthquake there, folks? Bye-bye, North America, once again. It's even a closed-down nuclear power plant, and it could still kill us. I thought I'd talk about Edward Bernays on the back end of this, because Edward Bernays, let's see, I'll open this up. Edward Bernays was an Austrian-American pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda, and was referred to in his obituary as the father of public relations. Wasn't that a really nice way to put it? Edward Bernays wrote this in 1928. History is a Weapon by Edward Bernays. Propaganda, 1928. The American business community was also very impressed with the propaganda effort. They had a problem at that. The country was becoming formally more democratic. A lot more people were able to vote and that sort of thing. The country was becoming wealthier and more people could participate, and a lot of new immigrants were coming in, and so on. So, what do? It's going to be harder to run things as a private club. Therefore, obviously, you have to control what people think. There had been public relations specialists, but there never was a public relations industry. There was a guy hired to make Rockefeller's image look prettier and that sort of thing. But this huge public relations industry, which is a U.S. invention and a monstrous industry, came out of the First World War. The leading figures were people in the Creel Commission. In fact, the main one, Edward Bernays, comes right out of the Creel Commission. He has a book that came out right afterwards called Propaganda. The term propaganda, incidentally, does not have negative connotations in those days. It was during the Second World War that the term became taboo because it was connected. This is by Noam Chomsky. This is what he's talking about. This is the preface. The term propaganda, incidentally, did not have negative connotations in those days. It was during the Second World War that the term became taboo because it was connected with Germany and all those bad things. But in this period, the term propaganda just meant information or something like that. So he wrote a book called Propaganda around 1925, and it starts off by saying he is applying the lessons of the First World War. The propaganda of the First World War and this commission that he was part of showed, he says, that it is possible to regiment the public mind every bit as much as an army regiments its body. These new techniques of regimentation of minds, he said, had to be used by the intelligent minorities in order to make sure that the Slavs stay on the right course. We can do it now because we have new techniques. The main manual of the Republic industry, this is the main manual of the Republic industry. I beg your pardon, the public relations industry. Bernays is the kind of guru. He was an authentic Kennedy Roosevelt liberal. He also engineered public relations behind the U.S.-backed coup which overthrew the democratic government of Guatemala. And Guatemala, my dears, are still suffering. They are suffering badly from that. His major coup, that was my comments, getting back to the reading. His major coup, the one that really propelled him into fame in the late 1920s, was getting women to smoke. Women didn't smoke in those days, and he ran huge campaigns for Chesterfield. We all know the techniques, models and movie stars with cigarettes coming out of their mouths and that kind of thing. He got enormous praise for that because he became a leading figure of the industry, and his book was the reading manual. Okay, so look, I'm going to read you a little bit of this beginning of it. It's called Organizing Chaos. These are the contents. Organizing Chaos, the new propaganda, the new propagandists, the psychology of public relations, business and the public, propaganda and political leadership, women's activities, and propaganda. Propaganda for education, propaganda in social service, art and science, mechanics, and propaganda. Those are the titles of his chapters, folks. This is what Edward Bernays has done. He gave it some serious thought, the mechanics of propaganda. So we are suffering at the hands of this man who decided as soon as they were able to listen to the radio and have massive, humans are visual, we're auditory, so as soon as we were able to see and hear, we went along with the flow. We were molded like clay, and we are still seeing the suffering of it. In fact, to the point where they were able to frame Hillary Clinton to be such a villain that this country actually is ignoring, A, that the election was stolen, first by the Democrats. They stole it from Bernie Sanders, and B, that now we have a fascist running into our country and running our country. It's unbelievable, the appointments. He has appointed Goldman Sachs people. He's appointing all the bankers. I have to say, I laughed out loud. It was unbelievable. And Americans are just like, oh, well, we're going to, we can survive. No, we can't survive, folks. How many people is he going to kill when he kicks them off of Medicare? How many people is he going to kill by ignoring the nuclear industry and their lies, their complete lies? I just can't get over this. I hope that people will share our story, our show, contribute to our show, go to ucy.tv website, make a contribution, even if it's $25, make a contribution and get this radio station listened to by millions of people. We have an opportunity here that is without advertising, without influence, and we have some really dynamic shows on this station. And frankly, it's the only place I know where we can go and get real nuclear information. Like this, Department of Ecology, State of Washington. I'm going to go down. We read this last one the other day. How many tanks are leaking and when did they start? And this was like the killer at the end. Note that 67 tanks leaked at least 1 million gallons in the past. Really? We read this one. No immediate threat to public health. What are the options? This is the scary part. This is their options. What are the options for dealing with the leaking tanks? The single shell tanks are all unfit for use and decades past their design life. It would be impossible to repair and upgrade the SSTs, like how they call them SSTs, single shell tanks. Wow, this is so horrendous. Increasing monitoring, developing new technology, constructs service barriers. They built a fence around it. Okay, let's look at them. I think we talked about this the other day. Disposing some of the waste at the isolation pilot plant in New Mexico. That is not a possibility anymore since it blew up. So that's not going to happen. The isolation treatment plant, the isolation water, we call it the WIP. Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. It's called the WIP. It's not a possibility to put any of this waste there. How are the tanks monitored? Listen to what they say. This is on an official government website, folks. And you know why they can put this on here? Because nobody goes there, nobody cares, and your children are being affected by this disaster that we are ignoring. And they like to now call these things, oh, this is America's Fukushima. So far, we have Hanford being called America's Fukushima. We have Indian Point being called America's Fukushima. That's the big threat. Well, Fukushima is not a one-time event that happened. It's still going on. The crime against humanity, the harm that it's doing is still going on. So it is imperative that every listener to this show take action. Seriously, take action. Share our show. Get people to listen to this show. Encourage people to listen to it. It's not uncomfortable. It's actually entertaining some of the time. I think most of the time, frankly, the people that we have on are very compelling. And, it's something that we all need to face. Listen to what the state of Washington has this on their website. The Department of Ecology says this. And this is will make you fall off your chair. How are the tanks monitored? Monitoring of the tank waste is difficult, in part due to the high radiation and the harsh chemical environment inside most tanks. Access to the insides of the tanks is limited. All of the tanks have monitoring instruments inside them. This is a requirement of the tri-party agreement. However, analyzing the monitoring data is a complex process, and it can be very difficult to detect very small changes in waste level in tanks that do not have much liquid or solid waste. The existing in-tank monitoring equipment is imperfect, but no better systems have been identified. The U.S. Department of Energy can currently only monitor the surface level at one location in each tank. Most tanks have annual monitoring requirements. You know what that means? They have to look at it once a year. If they have an infra gauge, they are monitored continuously. One data point is gathered each day. I wonder how many of these have the INRAF gauge. It's got a trademark on it, so someone's making a boatload of money off of this. For tanks with liquid observation wells, the neutron probe is used quarterly to gather data. It was a look at long-term data trends of that data, something US DOE has never done before, that led to the conclusion there must be new leaks. How does Edward Moniz ever live with himself? Moniz, what's his name? That's not his first name. Moniz, Department of Secretary Moniz. He knows about this. He's a nuclear scientist. This is what makes him say he doesn't like nuclear. External tank monitoring can be used to detect releases to the environment, but is much more expensive to implement and also has limitations on its usefulness, which means they don't do it because it's expensive. It is being done, but Ecology is looking at ways to improve the monitoring process. And there's a link that we could follow up, which I won't do in light of the time that we have. It's 8:31. Again, you are listening to Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. If anybody wants to call in, I've asked Jules to open the phone lines. The other day when I had Jose on, I encouraged people to call in. And the other day on Tuesday, but it turns out I had to ask Jules to put the phone on, so I didn't think I could take a call. So let's see if we can connect any calls if anybody wants to call in. The number is 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. So we're still on this page, Department of Ecology, State of Washington. We're talking about the Hanford tanks that are leaking, folks. And they're telling us that it's very difficult. Of course it's difficult to manage. It's highly radioactive with tons of chemicals. It is a toxic slough. The Pacific Northwest, the Columbia River, at the mouth of the Columbia River on the Pacific Ocean is one of the largest dead zones on the planet. Next to Fukushima, it used to be the largest dead zone. But since Fukushima's taken over that thing. And, both of these sites have continual leaks. So listen to this statement. This is really they wrap you around. Talk about Edward Bernays. They wrap you around their train of thought. Number 5, wasn't all the liquid pumped out of the SSTs years ago? SSTs, single shell tanks. So, if so, why are these tanks leaking again? Hanford's single shell tanks were interim stabilized between 1978 and 1910. Interim stabilized. Ecology sued the U.S. Department of Energy to finish the interim stabilization in 1999 and through a consent decree. The interim stabilization process removed as much pumpable or free liquid as was, quote, practicable, unquote. Practicable means pumping was continued until the rate was very low, less than 0.05 gallons per minute. And they have a picture of the sludge and the waste, and it is a brown toxic slough of waste that is lining the edge of this tank. It looks like foam. It kind of looks like gems. When you go into a cave and there's all these gems with all the marbling in the rock. That's what it looks like. Only this is a toxic slough. However, liquids drain very slowly through the salt cake and sludge. Salt cake, you see, this is what they're doing. These dumb-ass scientists thought that salt would hold it together. No, salt collapses. That's why WIP collapsed. And there was only one pumping location per tank. Only one pumping location per tank. So they stuck one thing in it, and that was all they did. Oh, that's the best we could do. Over time, additional liquids can drain to the pumping location, so liquids still in the tank can be pumped after they migrate to the pumping location. Some tanks met interim stabilization requirements because they didn't have much waste in the first place. 6 tanks were administratively interim stabilized after pumping equipment failed and was too expensive to replace. They literally put this on their website. Do you guys understand how important it is that you get people to pay attention to this and listen to our radio show? I mean, look, there's comfort in numbers, folks. If we all face this together, it wouldn't be so devastating. But as long as we ignore it, our children are going to get brain cancer. They're going to have endocrine problems. The fact is, we're going to have all these things anyways because we're there. We're in the pot of boiling water. The water's too hot. We can't really get out. It's a matter of time. When they're talking about human life in 100 years, they're dreaming unless we fucking get our scientists back and have them start going, wait a minute, we've got to figure out how we can neutralize. And we do know. Phytoremediation. We do know through microbes, through mushrooms. There's ways that we can do it. We could have blanketed the entire Northwest with hundreds and thousands of tons of this stuff on a regular, ongoing basis and allow the processes of Mother Nature to reverse this. The reason that we can't do it is not the cost. It's because they have no intention of stopping the nuclear industry. They have no intention of poisoning the planet. You know, the United States came into being with the idea of being a country where we have liberty and freedom. And it is very quickly turning, since World War II, really since Edward Bernays started this, the whole propaganda machine. People's eyes have just been taken aback. And it is just, we're being ripped apart limb by limb by limb. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to fight until I'm done. We do not have a choice. We owe it to our children to face this and to get other people to face this and to get people to listen to us. Our phone number is 718-717-8296 if anybody wants to call in. So I'm going to continue to read on the Department of Ecology from Hanford. Doggone it, I wanted to give you this phone number. Okay. How hard is it to get the waste out of the tanks? Blah, blah, blah. So let's move on because this isn't doing nothing but making me angry. We have this guy in 2016 telling us that is if there are no nuclear disasters. But even with the disasters, if we divide them, listen to their goddamn thinking. If we divide, even with the disasters, if we divide them by years of operation, making allowance for Fukushima and Chernobyl disasters, then the environmental and human impact will be minimal for such an energy source in MPP in contrast to coal and other power plants, he said when asked about the accidents. So if we just divide them, buttressing his contention with WHO data, Chudakov said over 7 million people die annually of diseases directly connected with heavy metal and carbon dioxide emissions that are mainly caused by coal-fired power industry. This is the official data. Unofficial figures are much higher. The nuclear industry does not show such values. You know why? The IAEA refuses to allow the World Health Organization to conduct any studies whatsoever that are reasonable or even fair. They're trying to tell us that 1,500 people died from Chernobyl and nobody died at Fukushima. This is such the brainwashing. This is Edward Bernays. This guy, I actually hope there is a hell, and I hope this guy is burning in hell, to be honest. I know that's vindictive. I ought not to talk like that. But honestly, it's so outrageous that we are the victims of serious propaganda efforts. And you know what? I will give it to you. I was actually very much like that myself. Helen Caldicott came up to the Pacific Northwest a few years ago. I was I began to see that nuclear was bad. This was before Fukushima, or maybe it was right after Fukushima. But this is when I really thought the government had told us the truth, that the fire engines came in, and don't worry, folks, they put the big bad fire out. And I did not make time to go see Helen Caldicott because I did not understand the gravity of what has happened. And neither has millions and billions of human beings on this planet. And then when you talk to them, they're like, oh, well, we're going to die of something. They have no idea what we're talking about when we say we're going to die of something. We're not going to just die of something. This is not about just death. This is about the destruction of all life on our planet. I have actually let me see what the new things are. I've actually started making that Excel spreadsheet with the mass animal deaths. Do you know that in January last year, I just finished up January, even through finals week, I decided to start this because it's been on my brain. And I just couldn't live with it anymore. So I started the Excel spreadsheet. January 2016, our planet saw the loss of 3 million birds. 3 million. And the way they count fish is outrageous because with fish, they list them in tons. So it's over several million gallons. Several million tons of fish. And they list them, as thousands of fish. So let's just go to the current one in November because I'm going to have it up relatively soon. As soon as I get out of school, I'm going to be doing my continuing education and creating this spreadsheet. But this is today's news. Listen to this. 2,000 deer are dead due to disease in South Dakota, America. 2,000 deer. November 28th, 1 million pounds of dead fish washed up in Southampton, New York. 1 million pounds. 1 million pounds, folks, of dead fish washed up in Southampton, New York. They have a picture of it, and there is just fish strewn for miles, as much as you can see. November 28th, 320,000 birds killed due to the avian flu. They're called in northern Japan. They call it the avian flu because they can. Again, it's the propaganda machine. It's bullshit. Honestly, there's no other word for this. It is radioactive contamination that is killing these birds. And the IAEA has the authority to suppress any testing of these animals. This is why those two scientists who tested the water off of the Pacific Ocean instead of the fish. This is how the IAEA has complete authority over all things nuclear in every agency on the entire planet. It is a UN-based organization for a reason because they can control everything. And if you don't believe me, go to the independent WHO. Look that up, independentwho.org. And it is it's doctors who worked for the World Health Organization who got sick of them refusing to allow them to really study the harm of nuclear on the human species. Because they do not. They suppress what do you think they gave us the Zika virus for? That's not, this disease for these animals. In Japan, 320,000 birds were not killed by the avian flu. They were caused by Fukushima radiation, period. Scientific studies? None. Zero. No scientific studies to disprove they weren't killed by the radiation in Japan. None. They don't even allow the conversation. 190,000 ducks killed. Avian flu again in the Netherlands. Mass die-off of fish wash along in Vietnam. November 27th. Thousands of dead fish washing up. Scientists puzzled in Nova Scotia, Canada. Things that make you go, It's annoying, folks. What's really more annoying is that people just look at you, roll your eyes, and they don't want to talk about it. You know what? We need to allow people to talk about it. And we need to be able to tell people about this. And this is partly why I'm making up this Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to put it into a flyer. I'm going to start printing things out and giving it away. Because people need to see it in their hands. They need to look at it and let it sink in. I'm talking about it, but how many are listening? 1,000 people, 1,500, 2,000, even 18,000. That's a drop in the bucket. Even if we had like 50,000 people listening to this radio show right now, in terms of the whole planet, that's a drop in the bucket. We need to create a movement, and we need to get all these nuclear people not shooting themselves in the foot, not rolling their eyes going, yeah, well, I'm the expert. I know. I'm the one. You don't know. You don't know. Oh, you're just being ridiculous. They all say that. The common theme among all of them is they all think they're the experts. I think that's why I found the videos of Dana going after these people just offensive. He may feel that way. That's his opinions. But let's stop shooting each other in the head. It's ridiculous to demean each other's reputations. Dana Durnford's done a lot of great work. He went up and down the coast. He put his life at risk. He freaking lost his wheelchair. I was watching his videos in the wheelchair. He woke up one day and didn't have a wheelchair. He had to hobble around and then started using his sticks and decided, fuck it, I'm just going to use my sticks. I mean, this whole thing is just ridiculous. This is why I refuse to say anything negative about Kevin Blanche. We've had our differences, but you know what? Kevin has his activism. He was on this station for several years, twice a week, giving everybody F-bombs all morning long. But his activism is real, and his point is real. Nuclear is death to our planet. Okay, want to know about the death to our planet? Thousands of dead fish, Nova Scotia, hundreds of fish, plus 35 turtles, Bahia, Brazil. 200,000 chickens killed in the avian flu. Again, Sweden, that old avian flu. Or it's a mystery. 100 birds found dead in the street in Italy. Thousands of dead starfish washed up in Portsmouth, England. Thousands of dead fish floating in the Malacca River, Malaysia. 283,000 birds killed due to the avian flu. 5,000 birds dead along the Michigan River. 3 dolphins dead, Nova Scotia. Thousands of geese and chickens killed to avian flu, Germany. Large die-off of fish in Chiclayo, Peru. I've been to Chiclayo, Peru, and I'll tell you what, it was a stinky, smelly little fish packing plant. Ugh. I mean, I don't know how to think that the people there had to deal with this. It is a sad thing because they are very poor. Most of the people didn't even have glass in their windows. They had boards covering up their windows. I mean, Americans have no idea what poverty looks like. I see we've got 10 minutes left. I'm not even finished with November, folks. I'm on November 19th here. This is 1 month of mass animal deaths. Hundreds of cattle dead after drinking an herbicide in Argentina. 62,000 birds killed due to avian flu in South Korea. Hundreds of dead fish in Machlaca, Florida, America. Dozens of fur seals washing dead or dying along the shores of California. I saw that story and somebody said, we've got to protect our animals. And I said, really? Well, then start speaking out about Fukushima, because that's what's calling it. 40,000 tons of fish died in Chiapas, Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of lobsters dead due to flooding in Vietnam. Massive die-off of fish in Shinnecock Canal, New York. Wow, they don't even tell us. See, this is why it's really kind of hard to figure out how many have died. And this is to November 14th. It goes on and on and on. Every day there is something reported. And we have this guy telling us, oh, that's if there's no nuclear accidents. And if you divide all the harm divided by the number of years in operation, it's actually relatively safe. I mean, this guy, frankly, he makes me want to tie him to a chair and beat him up, the guy. Seriously. These people are evil. These are evil human beings who are intentionally, or maybe they're just so brainwashed. I mean, maybe that's the thing. I have got no idea. No idea. Mikhail Chudakov, that's his name. Mikhail, M-I-K-H-I-L, Chudakov. I guess he's a Russian, running the IAEA Deputy Director General. That's his name. Wow. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I've done nothing but share with you this information that is just stunning to me. The reason I talked to you about Hanford is because the Columbia Generating Station is 15 miles away from Hanford. These tanks at Hanford must, as you have been hearing at the beginning of the show, they need to be maintained. They have to be maintained all the time. It's a constant process. The waste in the tanks is not homogeneous and can have varied properties at different locations in each tank. The solid waste is generally broken up using high-pressured spray, which means existing liquid is constantly recirculated, so more waste isn't created. So it constantly has to be worked. It has to constantly be maintained 24 hours a day. In addition to the above challenges, pumps and other equipment breaks, the weather can become too hot for workers to in a safe protective gear or too cold for equipment to work properly. When equipment operates smoothly and weather conditions are safe for workers, tank retrieval work continues around the clock, around the clock, around the clock. What will happen when, not if, when there is a nuclear meltdown at the Columbia Generating Station, whose design is almost identical to Fukushima? What is going to happen? You know what will happen? There will be a nuclear meltdown and nobody can get near it for at least 2 weeks. The nuclear radiation coming out of a meltdown will cause, even if they could get in a week, which is not likely, but let's say they could get in a week, leaving the tanks at Hanford unattended for a week will cause them to explode after about 48 to 72 hours. We are going to have a catastrophe on our hands, unlike this planet has ever seen, when the Columbia Generating Station has a nuclear meltdown caused by an earthquake, if not other events that cause the nuclear meltdowns at a nuclear facility, like inadequate responses. You know, the safety culture has never been tested. This is why we have accidents. They're all going on a safety culture model that has never been tested. And when it was tested in 2012, it failed the test. There are 7 things that they say they do. All of them failed, except for one. And the only one that really did not fail was the ability for people to talk, to report. That was it. Everything else failed. Nothing about the nuclear industry is safe. Zero. Nothing. So I am going to give you this phone number. Once again, please go get a pencil and a paper. And when this show is over, please pick up your phone. Call Elliot Mainzer, Mainzer, Elliot Mainzer at the Bonneville Power Administration in Portland, Oregon. 800-282-3713. Call him and tell him, in light of the increasing levels of earthquakes on the West Coast, we feel it is imperative that they shut the Columbia Generating Station down immediately, not in 6 months from now, not in a year from now. Start the wheels rolling to get that place shut down immediately. Immediately. We cannot wait. We honestly cannot wait. We know we have a disaster in waiting, and we cannot wait. So please call 800-282-3713. Attempt to speak with Elliot Mainzer. Call him at least once a week until we get this place closed down. The more people that call them, the more pressure they'll feel, the more they're going to become aware that people are aware that they're lying to us. They know that it's dangerous. But you know why they keep pushing it down, as Kevin calls it, kicking the can down the road? Because that's their directive. They're told to do this. These people's lives are threatened. Look what happens to the workers at, oh goodness, I closed that one. Let me see if I can pull up this article. The workers, the injured workers at Hanford. Look how long it took Patty Amino. Look how long it took the people of Apollo to get pay and remediation. I mean, it is such an outrage that we allow people to get used and abused and thrown out like nobody's business. I mean, the Hanford workers are they're basically, if you get sick at Hanford, you get fired and your claims get denied. And so we've had this big, huge thing recently that will allow the workers to get at least compensation. Um, and we just ignore it. We have people here that are just being ignored. They're dying painful, horrible deaths. And in fact, my own science teacher in school was unbelievable. My own science teacher father worked there at Hanford. And she said, "Oh yeah, my dad worked at Hanford all of his life and he never got sick." And I'm like, "Really? Well, how old is he?" "Oh, he died." I'm like, "Oh my God." She's like, "Yeah, he died 2 years after he stopped working there. He got cancer and died pretty quickly." I said, "Don't you think it comes from the nuclear working there?" She's like, "Oh no, there's so many other things that could have caused it." Really? He worked there for 30 years. What's the incubation process? As Helen Caldecott tells us, 4 to 80 years. That's the incubation process. So I guarantee you, we need to be having people who get cancer. Anybody out there who's listening who may have had cancer, whose family has cancer, have their blood tested for radioactive contamination. See where they're at. Find out. It's outrageous. You know how expensive it is? They don't even want to find out. They don't even test us. So I'm going to make a shameless plug again for UCY.tv. I appreciate everybody who listens to our radio show. That means that you are actively engaged, and for that reason, I'm very grateful. Please take an extra step. Refer our radio station to your friends and family. Get people to listen to us. Share my podcast, my show, Libby Halevi's show, Nuclear Hot Seat. There's no other shows like this on the air where people actually come out and get experts and talk about nuclear contamination, talk about the connection of the propaganda machine in getting us all to just ignore it. And in fact, that's what the propaganda machine is, what's going to keep you from sharing this radio station. You're like, well, I don't want to get involved. No thanks. It's just too much. People don't want to talk about it, and I don't want to have that negative effect. Really? Well, when your child gets cancer, or if they become sterile and you can't ever be a grandparent again, or when you're sterile. I mean, these are things that happen. Schizophrenia, diabetes, sterility. On the NRC website, they have the audacity to say they know that for every 2 rems of radiation in the air, this is old standards, by the way, not new standards. We accept 32,000 leukemias and cancers every year, and over 200,000 birth defects every year. Now, we know that we have higher levels of radiation. Those standards were set in the 50s. We know that the levels of radioactive contamination on our planet is much higher now, which is why it's harder and harder to be a mammal on this planet and be healthy. That's why we have the mass animal deaths. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I do appreciate you listening to us. Please do share this radio station. Make a contribution to UCY.tv. Go to our website, www.ucy.tv/AOF. That'll bring you to my podcast. Scroll down on the page and hit the contribution button and make a donation to this station. We need to keep this station alive and well and growing, and it's going to be up to us to do that. So I don't know if Dana Durnford will share the air with me tomorrow. I hope that he will, because I don't mind talking to people that I disagree with. I don't like what he's done. And frankly, the, quote, establishment anti-nuclear industry, they don't want to talk to us anyways because we cuss and we say things straight up. We're not measured thinkers, right? So, yeah, I'm a measured thinker, but I just don't believe that we need to tiptoe around the subject that the nuclear industry is killing everything on this planet. So please, put your courage feet on, take action, share my radio show with your friends and family, encourage them to listen to our podcasts. Put your courage feet on. Take action. Call Elliot Mainzer, 800-282-3713. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the host of Anti